Because the truth is that Israel do not hear the diplomacy. Israel do not hear the calls of Palestinians for equality. We decided to call going into the UN a diplomatic terrorism, and to go into the ICC, international terrorism. We basically describe every form of resistance as terrorism. Well, as an ex-soldier, I learned very personally that if you will not respect existence, you can expect resistance. To the Arab Jews that came around the years of 50 and onward into Israel, some came by choice, some came by force, but they didn't came to a country that was theirs. Came only about 2 years after Israel was already gave out most of the land into the European people, and they understood that they cannot hold the territory alone. They need more people on the ground to fight off Palestinians or Palestinian refugees if they will come back. And then they went off and brought most of the Arab Jews and put them in the most terrible places in Israel, on the borders with Egypt or Jordan or Lebanon and Syria. We put them at buffer zones to protect us from Palestinians. Some of them came in the 70s. The Zionist organization sends delegations into these Arab countries and called the Jews there to come into Israel, the Jewish homeland. Many of them didn't want to. Many of them, like in Iraq or Egypt, had a good life, or in Morocco, and wanted to stay. They didn't know what will be the destiny of this new country that understood that there's very much likely that a lot of wars will go on there. They felt protected in those countries, and they said no. And the Zionist organization sent another delegations into some of these countries of people disguised as Arabs from those countries, that terrorized those people to try to force them to come into Israel. They were born synagogues. We have testimonies today that talks about how they ran after people in the street and beat them down as so-called Arabs from Morocco, from Egypt or Iraq, trying to scare them. And immediately after that, more people from the Zionist movement would come and say, you see, the only safe place you have is Israel. You have to come now. And after they came, they were being sent into the most disgusting forms of settlement for the newcomers from those Arab countries, being sprayed from DDT with gas, trying to clean them up before they joining into the Ashkenazi, the European kids, to play with them. They were separated and segregated for years. That was not their country, and it's still not their country. And what they had to do to start to assimilate themselves inside this new country was to make sure that everybody understood that they're actually not Arabs. They look like Arabs, they talk Arabic, but they're not Arabs, they're Jewish, because you can be an American Jew and you can be a European Jew, but you cannot be an Arab Jew in Israel. And they erase their identity, and they starting to form what we know today as the most extreme right in Israel. They are the extreme right because they have to solidify themselves as the most loyal citizens of the states.
You hear this as a cycle of violence, though, and every time I bring up, especially being on the ground in the West Bank, visiting the Dawabsha family, or who's left of it, whenever you bring up these horrifying stories and accounts of terror on behalf of the Israeli settlers, a lot of people just say, what about the stabbing attacks? What about the terrorist attacks on behalf of Palestinians? And it's painted as a equal fight, as a cycle of violence. And then you have the truck attack that just happened in Jerusalem. As a former soldier, how do you view these attacks? How do you view the stabbings, especially when they are directed at soldiers?
Well, as an ex-soldier, I learned very personally that if you will not respect existence, you can expect resistance. And this is how people resist. Israel as a state like to use the idea that Palestinians only understand force or power. But the truth of the matter is that Israelis only understand power and force. Every other attempt from Palestinians to try to negotiate this situation in a diplomatic way was countered by more attacks, more oppression, and more occupation, more stealing of the land, more destroying of homes, more settlements being built. We decided to call going into the UN a diplomatic terrorism, and to go into the ICC, international terrorism. We basically describe every form of resistance as terrorism, because the sole idea of the occupation is not to be safe. The sole idea is to create an ethnically cleansed piece of land only for Jewish people, with Palestinian workers. Of course, some Palestinians can stay and do stuff for us, but this is our land. What people maybe don't understand is that Israel is creating the conditions into the situation of constantly having to protect yourself. We're creating this situation by oppressing millions of people until a phase where they have no other choice by resist. So many of these people lost a family member, had been to prison or lost someone in prison, and understood that nothing could be changed. Because the truth is that Israel do not hear the diplomacy. Israel do not hear the calls of Palestinians for equality. What we are seeing in Palestine is what a lot of people like to describe as the most complicated political situation of our time, is probably the most simple political situation of our time. It's a situation about equality.
It's amazing that you say that, Iran, because this is painted as the most complex, the most hard to solve. They've been fighting over there for thousands of years. You hear these things, but really, it really does come down to basic equality and humanity. Would you say that you support the right of Palestinians to fight their occupiers?
Absolutely. I support the right of every human being under an oppressive military rule to resist this military rule by any means possible. I do not believe that Israel have a right to occupy millions of human beings without every decent, simple, basic human rights for their name. And I do not believe that Israel would change on its own. At no point in history there was a state or a power that had the power to control over other human beings and benefit from it, and just decided to let go of this power by its own. It was always forced on them by the resistance of the people underneath them or the intervention of other forces around the world. And unfortunately, as I do support the Palestinian right to resist in any way, I do not believe that their resistance is enough. I do believe that the rest of the world have to interfere in what's going on in Palestine. There's nothing else that we can do except for giving all the Palestinians equal rights and starting a new state, a new equality system for all human beings on the ground.